Welcome back, everyone, to another edition of SpotOn Chat. I'm Bonnie Dillabo, your host, and we have with us our wonderful Rebecca Monet. Rebecca, welcome back.
Thanks, Bonnie. It's good to be here.
We are so excited about this next topic that we're going to talk about. We've been talking about the stages of growth. So, Rebecca, remind us what we talked about last week.
We were talking about stages of growth in franchise companies and how they can be very predictable. So if you recall, the stages of growth, there is work that comes from W.W. Rastow, and it also comes from Neil Churchill. Both were talking about stages of growth. Rastow was talking about the stages of economic growth, so how that affects governments, how that affects the economy. And his theories were that things are circular in nature. We'll start in one place, we'll tear up and go to a second, third, and fourth, and fifth place, and then we'll cycle right back. Neil Churchill and his associate Virginia Lewis suggested it was a tiering approach only, just a constant sort of moving upward situation. And they talked about the crises that were involved with each stage of growth, as well as how each stage of growth comes about. Zoracle, of course, uses some of these theories along with Claire Graves' work on what we call spiral dynamics, so the evolution of values, and integrates all of that into looking specifically at what stage of growth the franchisor is in, and even more importantly, what stage of growth the prospective franchisee fits best within. So that's kind of in a nutshell what we talked about last week. And today, of course, we'd like to talk about the stages, stage 2.
What are the aspects of stage 2 franchise companies?
In the entrepreneur stage, or stage 1, we noticed that the growth of a company was through their creativity. It came through a different widget, a better widget, or a better way to a niche market. So their growth came from the leadership focusing on creativity. Now, one of the challenges, of course, that a stage 1 franchisor had is due to the extreme focus on the creativity, there wasn't much time left to focus on leadership. He or she, the founder of the concept, was wearing so many hats, as was the employees at corporate, that oftentimes the eye got off of the vision. So here's where stage 2 comes in. In stage 2, a concept originator, the founder of the organization, realizes just that his eye has gotten off of the ball, and so he brings in typically a operations individual. This person will step in to a role where he or she will begin to systematize things and put some legs under these ideas. So there'll be a divide and conquer between the concept originator and this operational type of individual, and this individual will go out to the current franchisees and ask them, what are you doing? What's working? What are your best practices? Or begins to do some research as to how other companies are doing things. So this individual will begin to memorialize, create systems and procedures that put legs underneath this creativity that's been allowing this company to continue to move forward. So it begins to, a stage 2 company, what distinguishes it in large part is this kind of partnership thinking that's going on between this operations person and the concept originator. But it's also a partnership, which is why we're calling it this, between the franchisee and the franchisor, where they truly are in a place where the franchisor is reaching out to the franchisee and asking them, what are you doing well? What is working? And those best practices are being pulled back into that franchise company. So by stage 2, of course, the systems are beginning to be formed. In fact, that's the focus. The focus is on the system. The product and its offering becomes a lot more clear, and there's a clear idea about what our market penetration strategy is. And most importantly, Bonnie, is these best practices are being shared and memorialized in any way that we possibly can.
So this is the stage where the culture of the company starts to develop. The branding is starting to be more secure and more stable. And it's kind of a make it or break it point in a company's growth.
I think this is true of most companies, not just franchisors. If the legs don't get put under, then it ends up just being purely a cool widget or an interesting marketing niche, and it really doesn't start rolling. Now, honestly, Bonnie, after 20 years of being in this business, I have seen companies who stay in stage one for 20, 30 years. They just hang in there. The concept originator still at the helm, still just a handful of employees all working in a mad frenzy, and they never get to that place of systematizing, replicating, or truly making the kind of money that they can make. So the reality is someone can stay in stage one forever and never go to stage two. It just means there's a lot more chaos and not a lot of systems in place in that stage two company. But to your point about the market awareness and an idea that this business is indeed operating and people are aware of it. And that's because they've taken the time to come up with a strategy to go to marketplace and put in best practices. One of the other things that happens in stage two is those early franchisees, which we talked about last week, that are truly entrepreneurial, they're risk takers, they're pioneers, they're willing to do what it takes to go into that marketplace. These are a particular type of individual that likes a lot of autonomy. They like a hands-off approach from the franchisor. They're like running their own companies. All they've done is taken the product or service from the franchisor. And therein is where our crises come, in that the franchisor is moving into a partnership role, which requires this back and forth communication between the franchisee and the franchisor, and a sharing of best practices, and then a memorializing of those best practices and pushing them out to that next wave of franchisees. However, some of those early franchisees like their autonomy. They like doing it their own way. They don't want to have to embrace this way of doing things, or these additional accountabilities, or this additional level of communication. So therein is where our challenges for the franchisor begins, because the franchisee is starting to resist some of these changes. Not all of them. Some of them will embrace it as the culture, as you mentioned earlier, is evolving, but some will resist doing that. And they're not good. Remember, these are guys that negotiated some really cool contracts, probably way too liberal. They don't want to report what kind of money they're making. And so there starts to be some royalty flow issues. Mm-hmm. Then, of course, we have the franchisee, because he's being asked to embrace certain systems or report things that he wasn't asked before, or automation is starting to go in place because we're putting systems underneath this franchise system, may not be validating well. You know, this franchisee may not be validating well. He's not happy because he doesn't have as much control as he may have had. And then, of course, one of the final challenges that the franchisee or franchisor has is, if this concept is so new and unique, people are noticing. And so competition is starting to come in. And, you know, it may have been new a year ago, 18 months ago, 24 months ago, but now competitors are noticing and ramping up. So our stage one franchisee dealing with some competitors in the marketplace.
So I'm imagining in this day of how quickly new technologies develop and how easy it is to replicate things, that kind of window that they have to be the new kid on the block. is actually shortening, and it's even more of a challenge than it may have been 10 years ago.
Yes, and that's very, very true. This is why the stage 2 place is so important, and for a franchisor to do it right. One, have enough dollars, investors, or whatever form of financing you get, where you can always stay slightly ahead of the competitor. Mm-hmm. And usually it's the concept originator that's the creative one, coming up with the products and services.
Right.
So get that concept originator away from the day-to-day operations of a business so he or she can focus, like you said, on those new products and on those new technologies, and let somebody else put the systems in place. If the franchise concept originator, is still running the day-to-day operations, now he's focusing on leadership instead of creativity. We need both. Mm-hmm. We need both to continue to grow. Yeah.
So I can see that for a franchisor, right at this point, there are a lot of choices that they have to make that they maybe didn't think about when they first got all excited about their concept, their product, or their service, and how it was going to help people and make money. And now all of a sudden there are business decisions that they're having to make that they may not at this point be equipped for.
Exactly. They're not. This is why the stages of growth process is so powerful, is to show the franchisor these are predictable stages. We know when you're going to hit these markers, and we know the challenges that are going to come about. So if you're aware of them, you can be slightly ahead of them, bringing in that operational person as early as you possibly can financially afford them, and to do this divide and conquer, to reach out to the franchisee, acknowledging their brilliance and going into a frontier that had nothing and building something and getting their best practices, putting the ego, putting the pride aside, and starting to put the systems in place. And successful franchisors do just that, and they do it at the right time, and the concept originator is comfortable stepping. It's not stepping down, it's stepping sideways to make room for someone else up there to help you succeed. And it allows that franchisor to be laser focused on the competition and on creativity, on making something stay consistent with the vision they originally had, and allowing others to put in the operational pieces, the training pieces, the support pieces, the automation, etc.
Those are definitely distinct challenges for this particular phase of growth. But there are also some benefits on both sides, both for the franchisee and the franchisor.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the franchisee first. There are tons of wonderful benefits for the franchisee in a stage 2 franchise system, right? So
absolutely.
A stage 2 franchisor has some market awareness. So this next phase of franchisees are dealing with a brand that has some recognition, not in every market, but there is some market awareness. It's not a name that's unfamiliar to them. So they're not those early adopters. They're on that kind of bell curve where it's just coming up, if you can sort of envision that. So there's some market awareness. The second benefit is that the franchisor is more cognizant of what he brings to the table. So they're looking for franchisees that have complementary skill sets. If we recall, in stage 1, our franchisee had to have all the skill sets. They literally were doing everything out in that marketplace, and the only real thing they were being provided was an idea, was a product, was a particular service. But all the other pieces, systems, etc., the franchisee had to figure out pretty much on their own. So it was a franchisee that had broad spectrum core competencies, everything from marketing to sales to training to HR to technical skills. They had it across the board. But now, Stage 2, the franchisor is looking for complementary skill sets. We're beginning to look at creating an interdependent relationship, and therein lies the secret to success in franchising, is when it's complementary and interdependent. And in Stage 2, we're beginning to do that. We're starting to see we're looking for a franchisee with these types of core competencies, because as a franchisor, we're bringing the complement competency to it. So to our technical skills, to our back offices, to our research and development, we might need a franchisee that has sales and marketing skills, for example. The other benefit of to the franchisee is, of course, to some degree, there's some best practices. Those early-stage franchisees are now sharing them with the franchisor, and so they don't have to reinvent the wheel, at least not entirely. They're being introduced to some best practices. And in my opinion, one of the best benefits to the franchisee is what I call pruning. Remember, we talked about those early franchisees that loved autonomy, and they don't like someone breathing down their neck. Some of those early-stage franchisees will not move to Stage 2 with the franchisor. It's not they don't fit. They don't fit, right? So in this particular stage, the early-stage franchisee may be looking to exit simply because he's not a good fit or she's not a good fit. So looking to exit, they just wanted to ramp up and sell out. So a Stage 2 franchisee will have an opportunity to come in and buy that particular location that is already a going concern, already has some market presence, while that early-stage franchisee goes off and tries to find something else where he can have complete autonomy. So a crisis of autonomy can turn into a benefit for the next stage of franchisee.
So it sounds to me like getting through Stage 1, one part of me says getting through Stage 1 as quickly as possible would be the optimum thing, but not necessarily, because Stage 1 is still building a foundation for everything else that's going to come after. So is there an optimum time to get through Stage 1 into Stage 2, do you think?
No, there's really no optimal time. It is when the concept originator is ready to step aside. And for some, that's never. They like being at the helm. They will stay at the helm forever. They'll hire people to do certain things, but the buck always stops at their desk. Every decision comes from them. Every creative idea comes from them. So the best time is when the concept originator is ready. Ready. I would warn, however, that growth is indeed limited to his or her ability. Now, trust me, we have some pretty smart franchisors, so this is not usually an issue. But growth is limited to the ability of the concept originator to step aside, not step down, but step aside and share those roles with others. So we can be profitable at any stage as long as we're running a smooth and clean system. And I got to tell you, some franchisees prefer still working directly with the concept originator. There's some security in knowing that he or she is still at the helm, therefore still has, from their perspective, an eye on the future, and the passion that only an originator of a concept can have is still there. So some franchisees prefer it that way. So there's no, I wish I could say there's a perfect time, but there really isn't. The perfect time is when it's time.
It seems to me that, from my perspective, I would love that early stage where I would have direct connection to the originator, direct connection to the person who's doing the creating so that I could voice my opinions and have some impact on what's going on. But as a stage 2 person, you might not have the same connectivity, direct connectivity to the person who makes the decisions about the brand and, how we do things and all of that.
Well, and this is where it's important in that selection process, franchisor, franchisee, is there's a lot of connection at stage 2. That's why we call it a partnership stage. It really is a partnership between the franchisor and the franchisee. There's a lot of ongoing communication because the franchisor is wanting to know, what are you doing that's working? So this is a stage where there's a lot of interactivity, a lot of interdependency, and a lot of communication, and as you said, direct access to the originator. And early stage franchisees like that, or most of them like that. And so there are franchisees that fit well in a stage 1 and a stage 2, or there are franchisees that fit in stage 2 but not in 1. They don't want the chaos. They want the relationship. They want a certain amount of system but not perfected just yet. They want to have some, as you said, Bonnie, some impact, some say in policy. So they're a solid, what you're describing is a solid stage 2 franchisee, not necessarily a stage 1 or stage 3 franchisee, which is why it's so important to know who is our franchisor, what stage of growth is that concept in, and who am I as a prospective franchisee? Do I fit better in a stage 2, which in this case is what you're talking about? You would fit well in a stage 2, but a stage 4 you might be bored in because you don't have as much impact. You don't have as much say. There's not as much creativity going on in a later stage franchise. But in a stage 1 and a stage 2, lots of creativity going on, lots of interaction, and a direct connection to the concept originator. Again, lots of benefits for the franchisee that is attracted to and fits well within a stage 2 franchise partnership kind of business.
It occurs to me that in these stages of growth, we're getting closer and closer to the point where it becomes a cookie cutter as opposed to an adventure.
Yes, and that's what we call stage 3, which we'll talk about next week. It does become a cookie cutter, or what we call a plug and play. At some point, the systems are so fine-tuned and so well-oiled that an individual could come in, doesn't have to reinvent the wheel, and basically it's a plug and play. That's the direction the system will evolve. But a stage 2 company is not that, not yet. It's getting there. It's moving there. A stage 2.7 might be there, but a stage 2 solid, not so much.
One of the benefits to a franchisee, I would imagine, is the price still hasn't gone way up in the ability to own a franchise.
Yes, that's true. For a franchisee, there's clearer contracts at this point, because remember in stage 1 we gave away large territories as franchisors, regional development opportunities, forgiveness on royalties, some pretty liberal contracts favoring the franchisee instead of the franchisor. In stage 2, the legal team is starting to tighten up those contracts. But as you pointed out, there's still regional opportunities available, or at least multi-unit operations available. There's some resales available, as we mentioned, that from a pruning perspective. And, of course, there's market recognition. So the price point is inching up a little bit, but there's still great opportunity in stage 2 for a franchisee.
Can you give me an example of a stage 2 franchise?
We have a lot of stage 2 franchise companies. One that is something to take a real good look at is the elder care business, or children tutoring. etc. Amada Senior Care, a solid stage 2 franchise company where you have the concept originator playing the role that he needs to play, bringing on operations people, validating well. Second phase of franchisees are coming in, still creative, still unique, still competitive. So that's an example. Speed Pro, another solid stage 2, probably a stage 2.6 or in that range where the systems and the best practices are coming into place, but still good locations available, markets available. The name is getting out there. Folks are recognizing it. They're putting out a unique product. They're competing, but they're still creative. So those are a couple of good examples of stage 2 companies.
Last time you gave some really good recommendations for franchisors in this stage of growth. What advice would you give to a stage 2 franchisor at this point?
Well, taking them into consideration the normal crises that they're going to go through. And the crisis is the crisis of autonomy, meaning those early franchisees like doing it their way. So there's going to be some clash when the franchisor is bringing in best practices and putting legs on the system. So there's going to be pushback from some franchisees, not all. Those that are able to move into stage 3 and stage 2 and 3 are going to be comfortable. Those that are truly just stage 1 will not be comfortable. So my advice would be know what stage you're in. Know that you're in stage 2 and you're going to have some pushback by franchisees. Have a plan to help those franchisees either transition into stage 2, if indeed they're capable, or have a plan to help them exit, buy their territory back, help them sell that territory. Communicate with that franchisee the changes that are going to come about. So it's, again, recognize where you are and recognize that the crisis that's coming up is going to put some pressure. Keeping a franchisee that is not a stage 2 franchisee, he's a stage 1 franchisee on board, will cause validation issues. That is the death of a franchise system. When a franchisee doesn't validate well, or many franchisees don't validate well, the system stops growing. We stop bringing new franchisees in. So better to have a plan to exit these franchisees where it doesn't show up on your FDD as someone who went out in a disgruntled way or by not succeeding. You find a way to get them out. So that's one. Make sure that you have some processes in place to do that. And then the second piece is you gave away the farm in stage 1 as a franchisor. Pull back a little bit on those contracts with the prospective franchisee. You are established now. You have market presence now. You have systems now. You've earned the right to have solid contracts in place, and you're going to be focusing on those royalties and down the road marketing revenues. So put in some solid contracts with those franchisees so you can continue to fund the creativity and to continue to fund that growth. So those are the two biggest pieces I would recommend. And, of course, along with that, Bonnie, always comes communication of the changes and things coming about. Some of that is just managing the change and managing the process that the franchisee knows what's coming up, what changes are to be expected.
What about the franchisee? What do you recommend to them?
Well, great questions. Yeah, so a prospective franchisee, recommendations I have for them is, again, know the stage of growth where you are a best fit. A stage 2 company is still dynamic. It's got changes that are going to be coming into place. So make sure that really is a good fit for you. Do you like things that are more dynamic? But also be aware of those resale opportunities and take advantage of certain market presence that is already there. So make sure you are indeed a stage 2, because if your expectations are that this franchisor is already a stage 3, a plug and play, and all you have to do is just open the doors and business is going to come in, guess what? It's not going to happen. This is a stage 2 company. As a stage 2 franchisee, if you're choosing to be in a stage 2 company, you have to be a hunter. You still have to be a hunter, and you have to be comfortable being out in your local marketplace. If that's not who you are, then choose something in a later stage franchise. So know who you are. What about the franchisees that came in stage 1? Now a franchisor is in stage 2. Now hopefully the franchisor has done a good job and he selected a franchisee that can evolve in tandem. This is where Claire Graves' work comes in, where there's this interdependency and this evolution that goes in a spiral form or a circular and spiral form, and the franchisee has to come alongside of that. So hopefully the franchisor has done a good job, and he selected this franchisee that can spiral and move to that next level with the franchisor. If they haven't, and this is a franchisee that is a solid stage 1, they can't move to 2. They're going to be uncomfortable with all the reporting that's going to be expected. They were forgiven royalties. They don't want to start paying royalties. And the idea of paying a marketing fee every month just rubs them the wrong way. Or they don't want to work in partnership. They love their autonomy. They love the control of that autonomy. Then a stage 1 franchisee needs to know themselves well enough that it's time to move on. This is no longer the right business for you, but do so in a way where you don't harm yourself and your marketplace, because you've built some equity in that marketplace. And don't harm the franchisor. Allow the franchisor to know you're not quite comfortable with the way these things are evolving. You like a lot more autonomy. So it's time to exit. It's time to find somebody to step into that particular marketplace and move on. If you're planning for it, expect the franchisor. This is what's going to happen. It happens in all systems. So if you know, you can be planning ahead to find a solid exit strategy that makes financial sense and sense for you and your family.
And now we come to brokers. And, brokers are the matchmakers of that industry. And they have now another challenge that says they've been maybe working with this franchise for a while, and it's gone through its stage 1. It's now in stage 2. What do you recommend to brokers at this point in the game?
It's kind of the same thing we suggested last week, Bonnie, is know the franchise system. Know what stage of growth they're in and where they're evolving to. Know that franchisee inside and out in terms of their stage of growth. Match them up where the two are going to grow in tandem. Be extremely cautious with a stage 1 franchisee in a stage 2 system if they're not capable. So don't plug someone into a system if it's behind. Always forward. So if you have someone that scores as a stage 2 and stage 3, that works. This is a stage 2 company. They're going to fit perfectly. They're going to evolve perfectly into stage 1. If they're scoring as a stage 1 and they're not scoring as a stage 2, move them to a different business. Show them a business that's in stage 1. So what you want as a franchise broker is to make a solid match where that franchisee ramps up well, validates well, is satisfied and content, and of course is successful. And one of the ways to guarantee that and to put your franchisee on the right course is, of course, to understand what stage of growth this franchisee is going to fit the best at. The second thing I would offer brokers is give your prospective franchisee the data that they need. If you're going to show a stage 2 company to a prospective franchisee, be honest. Let that prospective franchisee know there may be some validation issues because those early franchisees like their autonomy and they're now having to report and do things they don't want to do. Let the prospective franchisee know that the system is dynamic and there may be some resale opportunities. So don't sugarcoat things for your prospective franchisee, but show them the opportunities and show them why these opportunities lie. It's kind of the anytime there's a crisis or a problem, there's usually a solution and there's a benefit that comes out of it. So you can spin things in that way, and most of our brokers are very, very good at doing just that.
So for a franchisor, having a broker that is on the ball can be a really key part of their success.
Right. It's different. It's different to hear from a broker who is acting as an advisor and an educator, coming alongside a prospective franchisee. It's different when the prospective franchisee hears from him or her, listen, I'm going to show you this company. It's an excellent company. It has a wonderful future. They're a stage 2 company, which means the concept originator is a visionary, extremely creative, going to always come out with great products and services, and is always paying attention to the competition and creating a market niche in this business. But it also means that they're still dynamic, and there are some challenges with it. And let me tell you what those challenges are. So hearing from the broker that is different than hearing from a franchise development member of that franchisor who's trying to explain why this particular franchisee at that location is unhappy. Because he's only unhappy because he's not wanting to report, or he wants more autonomy. It's a different it has a different weight when it comes from a broker than when it comes from in-house. So it's a wonderful partnership between the broker and the franchisor, especially in stage 2.
But the ideal is for a broker to be able to have some way of telling if the person that they are dealing with is a stage 1 or a stage 2, a stage 3. And the one tool that will allow them to do that is the Zoracle Profile Assessment.
Correct. The Zoracle Profile, the SpotOn profile, lets our franchisors, our prospective franchisees, and the brokers know very quickly that this is an individual that does or does not fit in a stage 2 business. It lets them know what stage of business is the best fit for them so they can make informed decisions.
In my marketing career, one of the most important things for me is to have good tools. And I think it's the same with any craftsman or anybody owning a business. Having good tools that allow you to do your business more effectively is really, really important. And to me, the Zoracle Profile Assessment is such an amazing tool for helping people understand, first of all, what stage of growth is the company in, second of all, what stage of growth would a potential franchisee fit in, and also the cultures and whatnot. And we're going to talk about cultures in future chats, but knowing this information gives you a big leg up towards being able to be more successful in making these matches.
Absolutely. And that's the whole vision of Zoracle, is to make this a win-win for our brokers, prospective franchisees, and our franchisors. We want our prospective franchisees to succeed. When they succeed, our franchisors succeed. So these are just tools to be used along with everything else that our franchisors and our brokers are using to make solid decisions, solid matches. It's a win. It's a win for everybody.
I think it's awesome. And they have the opportunity to, if they're a broker or a franchisor or a potential franchisee, they have the ability to go on to ZoracleProfiles.com and either take the assessment, and we do suggest that regardless of which part they're coming from, whether they're a franchisor, a broker, or a potential franchisee, to go ahead and take the assessment. It doesn't cost anything, and it's very enlightening to see all the information that's provided that comes out of taking this assessment. The report is amazing in the detail. And then secondly, for brokers or franchisors to go ahead and do the free trial. Try it out for yourself and see how much it helps and what amazing difference it makes in being able to make good matches with the people who want to become a franchisee, with the people who want to find a great franchisee for their business. And I think that is just so awesome. So next week, we're going to talk about stage 3 of growth. And what is that called again?
It's called plug and play.
Plug and play. I love plug and play. That's awesome. And we'll see you next week with a new edition of SpotOn Chat.